So a little bit about Guy. Guy went to NDSU, go North Dakota. He studied psychology and sociology. He's worked at St. Cloud Prison, Faribault, been at Shakopee, then went to Stillwater, and now is back at Shakopee as the head dude. And Janet went to Bethel, did marriage and family studies, studied clinical pastoral education, which allowed her to work institutionally. She has worked, kind of worked her way through a few things to come to where she is now. She worked at the Benedictine community during COVID, Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, and Regions, and now the DOC. She is both English and Spanish speaking, which I would guess would come in a little bit handy in prison. So I'm going to start out with Guy and just ask, Guy, what are the demographics of Shakopee? And while I ask you that, I'm just going to show you a picture of the facility.
So Shakopee is the only female prison in the state that's run by the state. There's also a female facility in Waseca that's run by the federal system. So the demographics, we have about 560 women there. So everybody that commits a felony, which is a year and a day or longer, comes to Shakopee. As you can see that picture, we didn't have our security fence around it, so now we have a security fence because Shakopee was built outside of Shakopee, and now we're in Shakopee. So that was a conversation to get that fence around that. Some of the interesting demographics we have, the one that always speaks to the most when we talk about is less than 1% of Native American women. There's less than 1% of Native American women in the state of Minnesota, so less than 1%. Out of the 560 women that we currently have today in Shakopee, 23% are Native American women. So there's a lot of energy that is put into that demographic.
Oh, okay.
Because it's
I want to make sure everyone can hear. Will you put your mic up
yep.
a little? Thank you.
Oh, there we go. So there's 550 women in Shakopee prison. There's in Minnesota, there's 1% of women that are Native American. So 1% are Native American women in Minnesota. Of our 560 women in Minnesota or in Shakopee, 23% are Native American. So 125 out of 560. So we put a lot of energy into the demographics and to provide services for everyone. You know, Shakopee is really just, it's a town. We have healthcare, we have education, we have higher education, we have jobs, we have manufacturing. You know, everything you can think of. We have a mailroom, a little police department, a kind of a jail inside the prison. I mean, everything that is, they need everything, all those services there. And my job is to manage through that. At 1 second, and it might flip second by second. 1 second, we're a school. We feel like a school. 1 second, we feel like a hospital. 1 second, we may feel like a prison. 1 second, we might feel like education, school, higher education, that, and that can flip on second by second. So my job is to balance the operation, and I can't do all the program. We're a program-rich, lots and lots of programs on Shakopee, but we can't do that unless we have a solid foundation of security. So I flip between those, want to stay in the programming side, but I have to make sure this is solid in order to get that so it's safe and secure. It's a very interesting place. It was built in 1985, circa 1985. You'll see some of the pictures, but it was really built as a residential grade kind of prison, in kind of a dormitory, female programming, parenting kind of style.
Yeah, and do the levels of security change?
So Minnesota we have a 5-level security system. Oak Park Heights is max custody. Close custody is Stillwater, Rush City, and St. Cloud. Level 3 facilities are Faribault, Moose Lake, and Lino. And then we have level 1s and 2s are our minimums in there at Lino, Stillwater, Faribault. So we're a 10 10 prisons in Minnesota under the state. We house about 9,000 guys, and men and women, in Minnesota. But at Shakopee, we have all the classifications. Everybody's there. Everybody, when you come in, you don't go to some different dorm because you're a level 5. Everybody comes in there and they're the same. Sometimes in like Stillwater, if we had a problem or an issue, we could send incarcerated people, that's what we call, incarcerated people to other prisons to kind of spread that around. But at Shakopee, you can't do that. We just have to manage.
So you might be in a room with somebody who has a different offense than you do.
Yep.
What are the different offenses?
So demographically, we have a portion, obviously, in for murder, homicide, that may never get out of prison and will serve their whole time there. We have some sex offenders, we have lots of drug offenses, lots of assault offenses, a variety of sentences, anywhere from a year and a day to life.
And by this time somebody gets to prison, aside from like murder, I mean, they may have committed these acts more than once.
Right, and so they have so to end up in prison, most people have multiple offenses that lead to that, have multiple chances that lead to that. Most of the women that come to Shakopee have been in a residential facility, anywhere from a group home to just a variety of things. So most of the people that we get in, come from the streets, we're unemployed, and this is really a time for them to leave all that behind and to get a voice and to get their voice and to move themselves forward without having all this around them. We have a lot of parenting classes and stuff, but it's the first time a lot of them haven't had a chance to just work on themselves.
Yeah, and there are, I would guess, a lot of needs that people have.
Multiple needs, chemical dependency, mental health issues, just co-occurring disorders that are just wrapped, and we have to kind of unwrap that. Our goal is to transform lives. That's our mission. So we have to unwrap a lot of stuff.
So part of transforming a life might be your spiritual connection, Janet.
Yeah, definitely. The mission of Department of Corrections changed in roughly around 2019, and the mission is transforming lives for a safer Minnesota. And transformation, obviously as a pastor, I feel is a deeply spiritual process. And so when women are coming into the prison, they go through an orientation class, and when I speak at that, I tell them that, Department of Corrections affirms that you are more than just a body, right? That your soul and the transformation and the healing of your deep soul wounds is imperative for your life to change. And so I always make the distinction with them as well. There's a difference between religion. So we have a lot of religious services, and those could be helpful, but we really want to talk about how do we nurture your spirit and how do you connect back to your own soul.
Right, because those would probably be sort of turned off or at a very low flame when you're committing crimes.
Very low flame. And I think as I was listening to Warden speak, I was being mindful that a lot of our women, not all of them, but a huge amount of them, have been sort of an accessory to crime. They've fulfilled that role where they've been living for somebody else, and they've been doing things, making poor choices, of course, but they've been making those choices a lot of times on behalf of other people that they have not been able to really live without. And so prison is sort of, as he had mentioned, it's that time where you actually get to find your own voice, figure out who you are, and who you're going to be.
All right, this is a picture of part of the programming, and that is
That's in our chemical dependency and mental health unit. That's called Monahan. All the buildings there are named after women of prominence. And that's just a kind of a day space. It's not as secure as like Stillwater, Rush City, Oak Park. It's more of a, they have keys to their rooms. You know, they have a little more, there's a little more breathability into the operation of Shakopee. And you also have to know that, or be aware that, you know, when I started in '89, a long time ago, we didn't have a lot of evidence-based practices. You know, you kind of did what you did. You either had anger management or chemical dependency. Through my career, it is becoming really streamlined where we have evidence-based practices. So we do an assessment when they come in, and we can tell that, okay, you need education, you need this, you need that, and we can determine what your risk and need level is, and find the program that will reduce your risk to recidivate in kind of a calculated manner. Our recidivism rate at Shakopee or in the department right now is 25%. 25% of the people that get released come back to prison within 3 years. So I guess I should say that the other way. 75% are successful and don't come back to prison.
Right, so 3 out of 4.
Yeah, so 3 out of 4 are successful.
And Janet, your work at Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge probably helped prepare you for some of the chemical dependency.
It definitely did. I was a chaplain with that program for almost 7 years, and I always say, you know, Teen Challenge is sort of, it's prison but on the outside. And it certainly doesn't have, they don't have security, right? But I'm just talking about the population. The population is very much the same. So at Teen Challenge, you have people who have been in prison or who are currently in prison and maybe are on a furlough. The judge has allowed them to come to the program because they don't see them as a flight risk. Some people get sentenced to Teen Challenge. So it's really the same population. So it was a very unique way to prepare me, I think, for corrections, because I understood the criminal thinking and some of the pieces that are just incumbent with our population, which can, you know, the criminal thinking and the manipulation, but also the deep, deep, deep trauma that comes with each of our people. So I had some understanding of that working with them on the outside. When I first came into the prison system, I've been at Shakopee, Faribault, and now back to Shakopee. But with women and men, both times I've known people. So when I come in, I already know a bunch of people because they've come through the doors of Teen Challenge. So that's a plus and a minus in corrections, because at Teen Challenge we operate on such a deeply relational level. That's part of how the program works. And then you come into corrections and it's supposed to be extreme boundaries, and that's how that environment works. So for me it's a little bit of a dance because there's always people who know me at a pretty personal level because they knew me at Teen Challenge.
So tell us about the boundaries. How does that work? What kind of boundaries do you have to keep? I mean, that's for Guy too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Because you guys are both really personable people.
I can talk about that one. So when I worked in the men's system, we were on the security side of the business most of the time. You know, there was fights and assaults and stuff, and we did our best to also have programming. And it's changed to that where there's more of a balance now, and we have great programming in the men's facilities as well, some of the higher custody levels. Shakopee we're most on the programming side, but you have to be aware that this side could spark like that. There's a lot of drama there. 550 incarcerated people that come from every background you can imagine, that have to live together in a dorm, that have to see each other 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at school, at mealtime, at services, all living together. So the boundaries are, some of them, like Chaplain said, very relational. Sometimes they The women will set up like a family structure kind of thing. I mean, this is their world. It's their town. Our jobs aren't to punish them or discipline them. Our jobs are just to make sure that I can remove obstacles to keep it on this side. But every single day, the majority of our reports are, it's like watching a football game, and you got to know when to take a time out. So it gets a sense of entitlement sometimes that we have to kind of reaffirm that why we're doing the work that we do. But I'm more tired when I drive home working at a female facility.
Yeah, I would add to that, one of the things I really enjoyed about working with the men was that they would come into my office space and they would just open up and cry because it was really a space for them to be emotive. It's hard for men especially to be emotional within prison. And at Shakopee, it's different because they too will come in and cry, but they've already cried and talked and sorted and resorted before they've come into my space. And what they really want is for me to somehow get involved.
So they want to manipulate you.
Yeah. They want me to take sides or take action, or if this person asks to meet with you, don't do it. And I'll say, well, just to be, here's a boundary. To be clear, I won't be asking permission, right? Like I don't ask those permissions. I'll do what I need to do. But a big piece that I always try to do, a boundary that's subtle but I think effective, is always bringing it back onto them. Like, how are you doing with this? And what's going on in your faith with this? What happens to your relationship with God when this person is making you so angry you want to hit a wall? Talk to me about that. Or we bring it back onto them, so that I don't want to spend an hour talking about this circular mess that's going on in the community. And I work a lot with our American Indian women, and so I meet with different groups of them throughout the week, numerous times. And so I will always say, how are we doing? And they know what that question means. It's like, because they have a lot of their own kind of drama and schisms that go on a routine basis within their, they're different tribes, they're different, all that.
Yeah, they go staff searching, so they'll work with one staff and get that to the point where they may need to move to another staff, and sometimes those kites, we call them, that they write aren't actually very accurate. Sometimes they are. I mean, I would say that, it's the percentage of everything. 90% of the women at Shakopee are fully engaged, are fully appropriate, are doing what they need to do, are remorseful. And then 10%, we spend a lot of time on the other 10%. They drive us. So you have to make sure that we don't spend all of our time on the 10% that aren't engaged. I talk to every woman that comes in at our receiving orientation, and I tell them, this is the most program-rich environment. Because the first question they ask is, when can I go to work release? When can I get out? When can I do this? And I say, I'll answer those, but leave a little space for this place, because I don't want you to get out in 10 years and go, man, I really blew it, because there's a lot of stuff here to help. I also tell them, if you don't want to do that, I'm not going to push you towards that. And if you don't want to have an opportunity to change, that's on you. But if your behavior is so bad that you take somebody else's opportunity away from them to change, then I'm concerned. And I have sent women out of state. We have a kind of a transfer system, an interstate compact agreement with other states that don't do it very often, but a few months I sent somebody to another state just because they just wanted to be on the security side of the business, and they were disrupting this side. I was going to lose 500 women in their engagement because the whole facility is focused around this one person.
So Janet, at the base of the women is the sexual abuse.
Correct. Yeah, we were chatting earlier, and I was saying, really, probably 100%. I don't. It's not an overstatement because it's just at this point it's true, but 100% of the women who meet with me or come in at some point will disclose childhood sexual trauma, childhood sexual abuse, rapes, things like that. So the whole area of sexuality and the depth that those wounds land on our soul and our spirit is an area of healing that is necessary, I think, for them to get hold of any type of change. And it's very, very deep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many levels here. Is there an average length of stay for an inmate? Guy?
Yeah, I just saw that it was 70 months. In Minnesota, you serve 2/3 of your time in prison, so if you get 60 months, you'll serve 40 in prison and 20 on supervised release with an agent. If you mess that up, you can get restructured and stay out. If it's bad enough, you will be sent back as a release fire back into the system and served to your expiration, your full 60 months, or somewhere between 40 and 60. You know, the prison system it's so complex that sometimes I feel like I can paint a picture. There's things that I have read that I can't unread. There are things that I've seen that I can't unsee. There's things that are very layers and layers onto the negative side of behavior in prisons. So I could paint this hour like, oh my God. But I could also paint it as this is the best best prison in the States. And I'm far more on this side of the general conversation. Shakopee has amazing staff, has amazing programs, teachers, nurses, therapists, all those different entities, amazing staff. I was told that this is a hiring event. That's how I got here, so I have applications for everybody. COVID was such in the prison system. You know, we shut down everything, gym, visiting, I mean, all kinds of stuff. I was at Stillwater at the time, and one day I had 900 inmates with COVID, and half the staff, 250 staff, had COVID. So we went 4 years basically just locked down. And then now, since about March of last year, we're really opening everything back up, so that's a good thing. But now COVID is kind of in the air again, so.
What are the conditions for a prisoner? I mean, what's kind of a day like, if there is such a thing?
Up at 6-ish.
Up at 6?
Well, I mean, it's not a big alarm, but
Yeah.
they go get medications because there's a high rate of the women are on medications. It's
Yep.
also their drug of choice, so they cocktail medications, and it's a very
Right.
we chase that behavior a lot. But the women at Shakopee, I would say, out of the 560, only about 10% don't have a job or aren't in school or aren't working. Those 10% are usually in our 32-bed segregation area where they have to serve some time for behavior and then they come back out. So we have a very, very, very low idle rate. If you don't count those 10% in segregation, most of the women are out of their cell and busy till 9 o'clock at night.
Yep.
We do a count every 4 hours of everybody there. So other than those count times, they're typically out in the day rooms, in the gym. We have courtyard, all kinds of stuff.
So one of the things that people are doing is the education piece, which is, in groups. And here's a picture of a group.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what group it is, but you can see the
is
board
it WOW?
says, yeah, check in, how are you?
Yeah.
And go ahead.
If you come in and you don't have a GED, you can't apply for another job out in the prison. You have to get your GED. We're also aligned with Mankato State University that you can get higher education. We've had people get their bachelor's degree. We're connected with an organization, Pipeline, to prison, and doing some paralegal. They can train on paralegal, on computers, on just straight manufacturing jobs with some contracts that we have. So they can be busy as much as it's not in your cell for 23 hours.
So I would imagine it's a challenge for someone getting out of prison to gain employment.
I would say it ebbs and flows with the economy, kind of. It's
Yep.
it's tough to get it. It's easy to get employment right now, but when
Even with a criminal record?
yeah, I mean
Yep.
we have release planners and community partners, and we work in our transitions unit. We help them write a resume, prepare them for all sorts of. We do interviews, like mock interviews with some of the women, so there's a lot there.
I would just throw a pitch, of course, agreeing, and I would just throw a pitch like to all of you. You know, sometimes people will wonder, like, what are things that I can do? How do we help our incarcerated populations? Those are great areas where you, who are on the outside, can kind of amplify the voices of those who are on the inside. And so any chance that you have to get involved or learn more about how, you know, we can further that ability for felons to be hired, that's a great area of people to kind of dig their heels in. And maybe it's something that you talk about in your workspace, whatever the case is, but the more we can amplify that need, that we need gainful employment for felons, we need that area to be discussed in our bigger culture. So
What
that we
are
can,
questions?
you know,
Excuse me, Janet. What are questions you might have?
How does Shakopee compare to the other states as far as their recommitting? Okay. How does the Shakopee prison compare to other prisons across the country with the recarceration rate?
You know, that 25% is pretty common, but we're on the, we're at the lower end. So it's all kind of data. So we in Minnesota have a very, very, very low incarceration rate. So take, for example, Wisconsin is a like size of a state, and they have, I think, 3 times the IPs. So if you take our prison system, this much people, and you take Wisconsin, this much people, and they say that they have 25%, well, they're taking some of the people that we don't even incarcerate. We have programming outside of incarceration. So the 25% of our population with a low incarceration rate in this state is very good, because it's not apples to apples, because they have different incarcerations.
Yeah, it seems pretty good to me that 3 out of 4, I think did I hear this right, could go back into society and actually live a life.
And not come back our line is not to come back to prison within 3 years.
Okay. And one of the issues will be family. And I think I noticed visiting times. I mean, visiting times vary. You have like different days, but I don't think you can visit on holidays. Is that right?
Right, holidays are closed for our staff.
Yeah, holidays are closed for staff, so that would be a bit challenging, but also understandable. Do you need volunteers?
Pre-COVID, we had 400 volunteers at Shakopee doing a variety of things, mostly in the
religious services.
services.
Yeah.
Coming out of COVID, we're starting to kind of ramp that up. I don't know specifically if somebody had this skill set, if we can match this. We have a volunteer services coordinator that coordinates all that. Probably have 100 volunteers now. But to Chaplain's point, really to amplify resources to the women before prison and after prison is really what we need. Connections upon release, mentors, kind of those type of things to be involved. We're kind of an end user of the criminal justice system. We're not involved in arrest or prosecution or, but when they get sentenced, they're sentenced to the Commissioner of Corrections. So when they get to us, so much has happened that,
Yeah.
that could have changed before that. You know, things that your congregation does, all those things. We're trying to reach out to people, maybe to help before or resources after, because when they come out, it's difficult. So our central office has a lot of volunteer type staff, not volunteer staff, but staff that guide some of that.
Thank you. I had the privilege of listening to these two at a Women of the ELCA conference about a month ago.
We started a road show. We went to that first
So
one.
I said, you got to come to my church.
And then I got another call, and I'm like, we're gonna.
We'll be your agent, won't
That's
we, Jerry?
right.
Yeah. I just think it's so fascinating. So one of the things that I have reflected upon that I guess I just don't quite know how to do is I have a little volunteer time, not a lot.
Yeah.
But what would I do? Do I go to your website? I mean, one of the things I learned last time is they need drivers for the little kids to go visit their moms. I could do that once a month. How would I sign up for that? I don't even know where. Do I call you guys or a volunteer sign up, career services or your essential, whatever?
Right.
Yeah, like the bringing the child to the correctional facility. There's volunteer service agencies that do that.
So it's outside?
It's outside of our
Yeah.
department, but there's a
Yeah.
billion things like that. The resource fair you had, had everything to help.
Right.
It's hard to answer that what you could do inside the prison.
Yeah.
Unless you have a very specific thing and we have a specific need and connect those dots. I would think that if you just, what you're doing now, listening and engaging and learning, that's very important to us. I mean, so you're already on the team. So.
And I think you're speaking to something that inside of me is kind of stirring, is like, where is this kind of coordinated, like, just go, like, where we can say, like, hey, if you go to this space, this website, it's going to have 3,000 different agencies, and you can go scrolling through them and determine, what is helpful. There's a church in St. Paul that operates a clothing closet, for lack of better terms, and it's all like clothing that women can wear to work. So it could be very professional to business casual, but it's all clothing to help outfit them because they know that that's a barrier, right? Most people don't even know that that exists. And so if you knew, you'd be donating your clothes there, right? Right. Doesn't that make sense? Yeah. So I think, that's really stirring in me. I created a new job for myself.
So just one of the recent things I'm working on is there's an agency called Canines.
Oh, yes.
I'm in the contract process of having 6 puppies come to Shakopee. So they can be in the room. They're getting trained 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Nobody else can do that. We had a program before, but with COVID, it kind of fell apart. So so there's different stages of training a dog. We're going to get 6 weeks to 6 months, and just that basic start, that weaning process, and then the puppies go to somewhere else, and then they become service dogs for autism, seizure detection, leader dog programs, all kinds of stuff. So that's just an example that Canines has a volunteer structure. So we'll wait and see how they do.
So I've got a question. I assume many of these women have children. What happens with those children during the time they're incarcerated? How do you keep those family bonds going, if at all? Or are they shipped off to foster care? Or what generally happens, and what role do you guys play?
So we have a full-time parenting coordinator that works on all that kind of social service stuff. We're not in the in the conversation about what happens, pre-sentencing. What we do is we have visiting, we have visiting more than a lot of facilities. We have visiting on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Friday, all right, Tuesdays, Thursday, Friday. Why am I missing one?
Yeah.
4 days a week, whatever 4 days there. So we have visiting 4 days a week. And we have our visiting room, and half of it is a kind of a children's area where they can be on the floor and they can actually just not sit across from somebody in a room, in a chair in a visiting room with a bunch of other people. We're also, pre-COVID, we had a special visit area where we have a room that's really set up for visiting your children under the age of 5 or 6. They're just not going to sit there and talk to you, but then you want to engage, do a puzzle or color or something like that. There's also a Healthy Start Act that when women are pregnant and coming into the system and they have a child right away, they can delay their coming to prison for a year so that they can get that attachment and then come in. Very successful. We used to have, when I was there before, we used to have like 12 pregnant women that are there doing time. They're pregnant and came in. And now I think we have like 3 or 4. And it's really that Healthy Start Act. We also have doulas that connect with the women and connect with all that kind of stuff. So the question is extremely important to us, and we see the connection, and we see that we have to be completely involved, and we have that conversation all the time. But we have visiting rooms, children's programs, parenting programs, all that kind of stuff.
We even have, and it might be another volunteer structured program. It's a van that comes, and I want to say it's like Mammo Lacto to Go-Go or something like that. And we have a mother who breast pumps and stores her milk, and they deliver the milk.
So we'll store it. They'll come pick it up and deliver it to the child where the child's living.
So, I think this is incredibly informative. I hope that you're enjoying it.
I have a question. I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the spiritual life of the people in your facility, and especially hearing the great recidivism rate, right? Like the connection to spirituality and finding that within themselves, and that maybe that connection to that lower rate. I just there's also you've been talking about how there's lots of really great evidence-based structures for how this stuff works, but I'm also kind of curious about what you see as far as spirituality and the importance of that to entering back into society and staying out of prison.
Right. So we on a regular kind of weekly basis, we have a huge amount of religious programs, and those are considered elective. And I will tell you that they're electing, right? They are, even though they're busy all day, they are signing up for evening things as well. So we have, 3 different Bible studies. We have a Christian worship service on Sunday. We now have a Lutheran worship service second Saturday evenings of the month. There's Catholic Mass, there's Islamic studies, Jewish studies. We have a rabbi that comes. I'm trying to think of kind of the gamut, just to give you some ideas. Centering prayer, that's kind of for everybody. So we have quite a variety of things. We do have also an organization called the American Indian Prison Project, and they come in and offer traditional classes to our women. And then because obviously our volunteers have a life outside, so on the inside then I help our American Indian women practice their ceremonies. So we have a pipe carrier, we have a drum keeper, we have a drum group, we have pipe and smudge, we have sweat lodge once, sometimes twice a month. So we offer quite a bit. With American Indian population, I will tell you, there's a huge statistic around this as well. They're highly urbanized. Less of them are living, like 70%, it's like a huge statistic, that are living urban instead of on reservation. So they're very disconnected from their practices. So for some of our women, they're coming in and learning about their own history, or they might have knowledge of their history, but they haven't been practicing. So they're coming in and connecting and learning about ceremonies and protocols. So it's a learning for a lot of them. And we always say, you know, our hope is that if you practice in here, you'll have the courage to practice out there. And that's true for really any of the groups. You know, our hope is that you will leave here and connect with a worshiping community on the outside. And I think by and large, all of the worshiping communities could use maybe some specific education even around that. You know, if I'm a Jewish synagogue or a Catholic church or an evangelical church, it doesn't matter. How are we prepared to receive people coming out of incarceration? And how do we make them a vital part of the community? That's hard to do. To be honest with you, it's hard to do. It sounds good. It's hard to do it.
Well, you have been listening to The Chaplain and the Warden. That's our new show. The Chaplain and the Warden, they go out. I know that we can pray for you, and we can pray for the prisoners and inmates, and we can pray that maybe, you know, if there's something stirring in us, that we take advantage of some of the programs, a couple that you listed. And I'm really impressed with your work and the work of the GOC, and like you said, the inmates going back into society. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.